I think that we can start. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this MAA series with the AIXR. My name is Nick Rosa. I work for Accenture, and today I'll have the pleasure of moderating this MAA session along with two amazing guests. We have Dave Bushore, that is the Vice President.
I think he froze again. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave. I work at Marvel Studios.
Being with us.
I'll just keep going, I guess. Hi. So, hi, I'm Dave Bushore. I work at Marvel Studios. I'm the executive producer of Avengers Damage Control. I oversee all of our immersive entertainment content for the studio, and got to work with ILMxLAB and Lucas Studios and Shereif and Liz Walker on this really cool project.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shereif Fattouh. I'm the senior producer over at ILMxLAB, and we got to work on this amazing project with all our folks at Marvel, with Dave and the team back at ILM, and we're really happy to be here.
I have to say that this is the coolest panel I've actually ever been on, in that like everyone gets to have their own cool avatar, and we get to be in this cool space, but we're in our houses, and like it's funny like getting back to real life, but it's really great actually seeing people in a virtual space and getting to talk about this project after all the time and effort we put into it. And I think our host is back. Yes.
Yes, sorry, apologies for that. I'm having some problems with my internet connection, so apologies if disconnects. Let's get into the questions immediately. Can you take us a little bit through the main challenges of treating a franchise like the Avengers? I think that this is for you, Dave. I know that you have to create something completely new in terms of storyline. There's something completely new in terms of gadgets and assets. Can you tell us a little bit more about all the challenges that you had to go through for creating this fantastic experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenges were unique in that for us at the studio, it was the first time we had done any immersive entertainment in any capacity outside of, our theme park activations. We had not done anything in VR to date. When I say that, I mean, from a studio perspective, there are some other things that live out there as it relates to Marvel, the Iron Man VR game and things like that. But this one was unique because it was coming from, our perspective in the studio, which is, we want to bring that level of quality, we want to bring that level of talent, we want to bring that level of perfectionism, we want to bring all of the things that people enjoy about the movies, the humor, the characters to life. And so I think in that regard, the challenges were, how do we get as much of that into the experience, and how do we do it on a platform that's new, right? Like the movies and going to the cinema is a very known quantity. We all know what it's like to go to the movies. But I think this was sort of, and I'll let Shereif maybe speak to some of this in terms of challenges. Like for us, it was talking to agents and talking to different people to get the talent that we got involved, and it was awesome, the level of commitment that we got from some of the talent in the Marvel universe to be involved in this. You're trying to explain to an agent or to a rep or to somebody like, it's virtual reality, and what is it? And it's virtual reality, so sort of like some of the, just the speed bumps that we all ran into today, just trying to get into this and get signed on the internet. Those are all just the initial challenges that show up every day with virtual reality. And so when you try to get talent involved in some of those things, and you're trying to get people to think about how you're going to be interacting with those characters in a different way, there's all kinds of things that come up. It's kind of Buster Keaton driving the train at the screen. You're gonna blow people's minds. And so I think that's where I'd hand it off to Shereif to say, what were some of the challenges that from a technical perspective. But I don't, from our perspective at the studio, it was, we want to bring the same level of quality that we bring to everything we do and we produce. And that in and of itself was an interestingly fun thing, because you're having to get to finally have the conversation with the industry of, we want these people to be involved in a really cool virtual reality experience for the fans.
And I have another question about the franchise. I mean, for a franchise like the Avengers, the connected universe timeline consistency is extremely important. And of course, you come up with a completely new storyline with a new superhero suit, mixing the Stark technology with the Wakanda technology. Can you take us a little bit through the creative process that led to the development of the story, the characters, and all those amazing toys? What kind of cross-pollination happened between ILMxLAB and Marvel Studios movie production during the development of Avengers Damage Control?
Yeah, I mean, it was a hugely collaborative process in the idea that, again, kind of what I was talking about earlier, is we wanted to approach that process the same way we approach everything we do with the films, which is our visual development team that works on the films was involved in the project. You know, it went all the way up to the head of the company, right, in terms of our leadership and the producers and everybody that's involved in the franchises. We always approached it from the perspective of, when is this going to come out? You know, and obviously we, you know, as with everyone in here in the world, you know, have to face the COVID pandemic, and it was unfortunate that our release date ran up, you know, just months before. And so in the idea that, like, the process of bringing it to life was largely the same, as close as we can get to what it is to bring the movies or the TV shows on Disney Plus to life, right? We have the same people involved. We want to have the people that write the shows involved, but then you're trying to translate that to an interactive perspective. And so there's a lot of learning curve when you try to explain to people, like, you have to write it like this, you have to think about it like this. It's not necessarily, you know, going to be viewed like this. There's going to be wind, there's going to be these other things. But just in terms of what you were saying about, like, the mixing of the Stark tech and the Black Panther tech, that was just a really fun conversation about, all right, well, look, if we're going to give people, like, what we're all looking at right now, as I'm looking out at this really cool crowd of avatars, a really cool avatar, what would that be, right? How would people get to step into that world and feel empowered? And I think it's a lot of what we try to do in the theme park world, is you want people to feel like they are the protagonist of their own story. And the best way to do that is to give them a really cool representation of themselves. And so the idea that, just from a conversational standpoint, what would happen at the end of Endgame? Again, looking at that calendar and when things were coming out, well, we knew what was going to happen at the end of Endgame. And if Tony was going to give his tech to anybody, it would be Shuri, right? She's the smartest, bravest, coolest designer in the Marvel Universe now. And so if something was to be mixed together, it's really cool to say she's going to do an homage to Iron Man, of course, but she's going to also make it her own, and she's going to make it cool, and she's going to make it Shuri. And that was really the auspice for the design of the suits. And we took that to the visual development team. They took it and ran with it, and the designs were just amazing. And I think the coolest thing was when we heard people, their reactions. You know, me and Liz got to be in New York when one of the locations opened, and you hear people's reactions to, oh, I'm Black Panther, you know, and it's just really cool. It's really exciting, people getting to live out those heroic dreams.
And it was, fantastic. I think, just also speaking to the production, you know, on the collaboration side, what was really great was just because there was such a strong relationship between ILM and Marvel Studios for, you know, the films and traditional VFX development. Touching back on when we're exploring concepts, it was just, we were really uniquely positioned to have access to so much, you know, assets, so many assets, and just the pipeline and all of the same kind of people that were working on the films and are so intimately familiar with the content with both of our studios. And so really, when we were exploring how to bring this to life, it was a lot of the challenge was kind of for ourselves, even, was like, how far can we push it? Because we really wanted it to be as photoreal as possible. We wanted it to be this really authentic story. And so there's always an inherent kind of challenge, I think, in every kind of VR experience where you're experimenting with how much, you know, interaction is going to be tied to it. How much are we going to allow, you know, is it going to be, you know, kind of dialogue spoken? I mean, these are really beloved characters, and the more believable they get, it was really trying that balance act of, you know, when is there going to be, you know, kind of interactive bits to it versus kind of being spoken at. And then a lot of it tied to, again, the visual fidelity and how far we could push it with the technology we had. And it was like really fun, very hard and challenging of how, balancing all of the things that you need to and any kind of real-time development with performance and everything else. But that was such a cool thing of having that really close-knit collaboration and having all of those kind of players that are used to working in it in the film side of it. Was just so invaluable to really trying to make it as authentic as we could.
And Shereif, sorry.
Oh, I would just add to that really
go on.
quickly in that, I'm just going to add one sentence really quickly to that is I think to Shereif's point about having all of the people involved who, we had Skywalker Sound, we had ILM, we had ILMxLAB, we had the visual development team at Marvel, we had the producing team at Marvel, we had all of the people that were involved. I think what was really cool, and I remember, Shereif, when we were up at XLab one day, working late into the afternoon on a Friday, right before I ran to get on a plane, to head back to LA. But like Pat stopping us and being like, "Can you look at this?" And you have these visual effects artists that are, Oscar award-winning people that are these really prolific artists, and they're working on this VR experience and trying to make it look absolutely as good as a film, right? Making it feel as absolutely immersive as what it is like sitting in a theater, except you're living it out. And so to your point, the challenges were also kind of negated because there was so much passion from so many really, really, really talented people. And so I think the challenges are always there with anything, but I think to your point, it's the access and it's the passion from those artists and those people that like take those things and kind of put them on the side because, everybody wants to make it great, right? And so it's just an interesting process.
And I remember to the public that we are talking about Avengers Damage Control, which won the Out-of-Home VR Entertainment of the Year during the last VR Awards 2020. And we are here with Dave and Shereif to get a deep dive into this amazing out-of-home experience that hopefully we're going to be able to experience even more as soon as this pandemic is going to be over. Now I have a question for Shereif. You mentioned about the methodology that you use for the development. Can we please deep dive a little bit more about the main challenges that you had during the development? You talked about you wanted to make the experience as photorealistic as possible, very immersive and so on. What are the main challenges that you faced as a producer? Also, maybe you want to mention a little bit about your background because you're coming from a pure video game background. And how this match with the kind of approach that you have with the production of this title?
Well, I think, immediately one of the challenges, and it's a super fun one, was that it was so innovative in that, this was kind of uncharted territory. There were some location-based experiences that had come out before. This kind of blend of, the physical, which was really attractive just from a development standpoint and like production, just from, creatively, it was so fun to think about, okay, how are we blending? It's not just VR, like we also have a physical stage. And that was kind of the newer, kind of element and a really intricate one, which was so great and so many different tools to use. And so for me personally, I come from a background in traditional AAA gaming. I worked at Electronic Arts for about 14 years. I've been developing, classic AAA games in sports and survival horror and adventure, et cetera. So it was always, kind of in the lens of, how do we make this fun and enjoyable and maintain the kind of user agency? And so that's always been a challenge, with actually even in traditional games, but in VR as well, is just that level of agency that you want to have of exploration and kind of creating your own venture versus, a linear narrative. There are always decisions and choices, and they're not always clear cut as which is, no such thing as right or wrong. It's really like, what is the expression that you're trying to tell, and how directed do you want that experience to be? And so it was always exploring. I would say that there were of course technical challenges with like the stage and again pushing the fidelity, and performance is always such a key thing because no one wants to tolerate, especially in a headset, beyond even traditional 2D. it can actually make people sick if there's low frame rate, and there, you know, I'm sure everyone here who's familiar with VR knows that like you don't want any kind of slowdown or frame rate drop in the experiences. So that kind of puts a little bit of a limiter on how far you can push the pixels, right? But that's what we kept trying to do, is trying to find those ways. But I really thought the more interesting challenges, those were fun to solve. It was really that the heart of the storytelling, and how do we bring these stories to life and finding that balance of kind of showing things, but then also making it interactive and making it in a way that you feel like a superhero. And so part of our process with that was, you know, working with Dave very early on, was really defining like our kind of key pillars and what we were trying to accomplish. Because you can go in so many different directions. And with the Marvel Cinematic Universe in particular, I mean, it was so fun. But honestly, in the very early days, it was also like kind of overwhelming in a way, because it's like there's such a breadth of material. There's so many characters. There's so many storylines. There's so many, you know, options. Like you can do almost anything, and everything is cool. So how do you narrow it down and pick? And we spent months, you know, kind of going through that and tossing around, you know, crazy ideas of where things could go, and what would be the most interesting thing for players, and what would be realistic that we could get that authenticity in and pull off well. What works in VR really drove that. I think things, as an example, in the experience, you know, with when we meet up with Ant-Man and we get the, you know, the really dynamic scale changes when you get shrunk down. That was something that we knew we really wanted to get in, because we knew that would be kind of really fun in VR and work well as that really massive, you know, scale differentiation that happens really quickly. We thought would just be something that you can only do there, and really, like, it just felt really fun to try to explore it. And so we fit it in there. It was like one of the running threads.
I just want to say one thing on the Ant-Man thing, which is hilarious to that story, Shereif, and is like, very early on in the testing, we put some very trusted partners through the beta tests, and, you know, writers and producers, people that I work with, Shereif work with, but I put a few people through, and this one guy who's a writer that I work with quite often, he went through, and in that exact moment when he got shrunk down is when Spider-Man shows up, and then you get shrunk down. And his biggest note when he came out was, I waited my entire life to meet Spider-Man in person, and then you shrunk me down. And it was also, so it was this very hilarious like juxtaposition of, we're giving everybody this amazing experience, and their complaint is, you shrunk me? And then you're like, yeah, but we shrunk you. Like, isn't that cool? And they're like, no, but I want to meet Spider-Man. And so it's a balance. It's interesting. It's just funny. Just thinking back to the process and the feedback and the things that we talked about and blah, blah, blah.
That's a really cool story. And I mean, I noticed that's also in the game, there's a very different interaction from the other experiences that you build in ILM for the Void, like Secrets of the Empire, where you were using a prop that was an actual gun. Instead, in this experience with the Avengers, you're using your hands. So can you tell us a little bit about the discovery journey that gave inspiration to the control user interaction in Avengers Damage Control?
Yeah, I mean, Shereif, do you want to speak to the technical? Or, I mean, I think, like, I'll just set up the idea that, like,
sure,
just from a Marvel perspective, and then I'll let Shereif jump in, is that, like, from a Marvel perspective, it was, no, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Shereif, but, like, from a Marvel perspective, it was, we want to do something that if a young person is going through this, it's the idea of, you don't need a gun to be a hero, right? And so, like, while some of our characters carry guns and use them in the movies, and it's fun and cool, and Rocket and other characters do that, it was this idea of you yourself are the hero, was the auspice of that conversation. And also, just if there is one thing that stands out as the most maybe iconic sound effect in the MCU to date is that Iron Man power-up blast, right? And so how do you make people feel like they get to do that? And then I think Shereif can speak to the amazing work that they did and the partnerships that they had with some of the outside companies to make sure that came to life.
Yeah, I mean, like Dave mentioned early on, we really wanted to make it, gesture based. It was very intentional, and it just fits so perfectly, with the fiction, again, of like empowering the guest, like that you are the hero, not, a weapon that you're holding. But on the technical side, we really wanted to explore, gesture, hand-based tracking was getting better and better. It still, it felt like it hadn't really there wasn't anything that was really pushing the boundary in that area yet. I think there was a lot of progress that was happening, but we saw it as a really great opportunity to see what we could do because it fit so well with the story and it fit, so well with just the creative intent. And so it was a lot of research, a lot of optimization, with our partners at The Void and other folks on the technology side. To really understand, how do we get this gaze-based, hand tracking in, and really understanding the weighting and understanding the, kind of latency issues, the recoil that we needed to have for it to feel satisfying. But it became really obvious early on, I have to say. I mean, Dave, remember, we got a prototype pretty early of just the basic gesture of firing, and it just was like,
I mean, it was magical. Right. I remember being up at ILM and me, you, and Ian Bowie and Michael Copperwise being on the temp stage, and putting on the backpack and walking in, and as soon as you raised your hand up and we get fired, and then the very next conversation, everyone lifted up their visor and said, "That was amazing." But it was like, okay, it's got to be 1 second longer, and the sound effect has to come in at this point to make it feel like it's because everybody has that lightsaber in their brain, of these very iconically cool movie things that they love, and there's a very specific timing to the Iron Man blast, right? And I think what was so cool was when we saw that early demo, to your point, was like the collaboration that went into it. It was we have to dial this right to the perfect point, and that went to the Sky Sound team and to everybody. Was like, what's the pitch and what's the tone and what does it feel like? And it took months and months and months and months. And I think that just speaks to just like a film collaboration or a story collaboration in any way. It's like you're recreating something in a different space, and the frames per second, and what is the quality of the earphones, and what is the quality of this, people are talking. How do you make sure it rings true and people get that feeling that they're like, oh man, I just fired an Iron Man blast. That was so cool. Like,
and every Void experience is the culmination of storyline technology and a proper artisanal craft that are coming all together. Can you take us through the timeline of the creative design production process of an experience like Avengers Damage Control? How long did it take to build this?
The timeline was me making Shereif sweat bullets 24 hours a day, because I would constantly change the script, and we'd constantly change the scope, and we'd constantly change the characters, and we'd add more characters and more lines and more scenes and more scope and more Quinjets. And then Shereif was like, "We're running out of time," and I was like, "That's cool. We're going to change it again later." But I think that's joking. All joking aside, I'll let Shereif speak to the larger timeline. But
I mean, it was very much like a traditional kind of AAA game. Maybe a little bit less just in the scope. I mean, the one thing we always were, just speaking to one of the challenges before, the duration is one thing. Like, we as developers and creatives, we wanted to make it, if we could have made it an hour long, we would have, just to be honest with you. Like, we couldn't stop putting content, and I was kind of supposed to say no, and I wouldn't, to be honest. Like, that's just the way it was. We just loved it so much. Everyone was super passionate about it. All of the artists, engineers, etc. Like, we just wanted to pack as much, because there was no shortage of ideas. Stuff that was on the cutting room floor would make for an amazing experience. We just had so much. And so, of course, the realities of any kind of, commercial endeavor, like, there is a budget, there is a timeline. And so, it was like roughly about 2 years of development from concept to initial launch, maybe a little less. I in another different world, like we'd still be working on it. That's just the way it is, right? You never want to let go. It's like, well,
you
I'll
created
take
the
5 years
longest
development if we can get
experience
it.
for the Void with the Marvel damage control. Avengers damage control is way longer than the Secrets of the Empire,
I mean,
right?
it's double, right? I mean, it's double, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the thing. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. I think we were very adamant early on that, like, we heard the feedback from people that were coming out of the experiences saying, that was really cool. I want to do more. That was really cool. I want to be in there longer. I want to blah, blah, blah. And so, I think Shereif can attest to the pain that I put him and the ILM team and the Void team through, which was constantly adding characters and constantly adding dialogue to try to feed that beast in a way that was like, well, if you can't do it with Avengers, then what should we be doing it with? And that's not to knock any of the other experiences or anything, but when you think about the swath of characters that people are going to want to interact with or have an experience with, it's not one, it's not two, it's the Avengers, and trying to, Shereif, that moment that we all thought about in the back of our heads is standing, on top of the helicarrier at the end of the experience, and you're surrounded by the Avengers, and you're the tip of the spear, and the music plays. Well, how do we do that, and how do we do that honestly from a story perspective? But I mean, the development process was, it was fun, but it was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. Like, let's be honest. Like, this is a medium that's not built for going over budget. It's not a medium that's built for going over time, because the margins in the VR industry right now are so small creatively to get things created and out the door that mean something to people, right? And I think some of the things that have done it really well have been very simple. We wanted to keep that in the back of our mind. We wanted people to make sure that they understood what was going on. I think I'll be honest. I think in some way we overpacked it, but that was kind of the point. Was to overwhelm people with this world. But that comes down to Shereif excellently navigated those waters in terms of the team at ILM and the team at ILMxLAB bringing that to life. Like, it's the development process is for these projects, especially at this scale, when you're talking about trying to get A-list talent involved, it's just rough. It's rough right now. And I think what was really great with what Secrets of the Empire did was they paved the road for showing this to our team and showing this to other people in the industry and putting it out in the world that, like, this is what's possible, and that's what inspired us. The development process was the timeline. I wish, of course, to Shereif's point, we would still be working on it, and that's not the case. but it's definitely the mindset, and it's interesting how to start thinking about those things. Just hearing the question of what is the development process, it's kind of the kitchen sink right now.
And in terms of the optics, optics, but also the wind and heat are signature to every Void experience, and are really what makes the experience memorable in the end, of course, along with the graphics and the storyline. But they really helps you to immerse into these fantastic environments of the Avengers. And you developed a new set of tricks for damage control. Can you tell us what are the ones that you're most proud of, and a little bit about the creative process behind this optics and heat and wind, but also I know that you implement a smell as well into the experience.
Yeah, I'll touch a little on that, and then I'll throw it over to Dave. You're exactly right. That was part of the excitement of this, this platform in general, was physical components. And I think what was so cool about, this had been, would be the third Void, ILMxLAB collaboration. So there was a lot of learnings about what went well in the previous experiences, and what are kind of some of the things and opportunities to make improvements. And so it was really great because Dave and everyone at Marvel, that went through, they kind of understood just immediately okay, this is, like they understand this is the canvas that we have. And so we were very intentional about where we're going to place these, haptic things not for the sake of a gimmick, but to really further the story and the immersion of it. So it wasn't just for the sake of being a fan because it's kind of cool. It was like, how does that tie into this beat? How does it tie into these characters? How does this make the story better? How is it just in general just cool for the guests? I think mine, it's really subtle, to be honest. Like my favorite haptic or, kind of effect moment on that from the physical was in actually the Sanctum Sanctorum when you're walking down the stairs and the wind blows in, like you have the magic window or you see, the snowy, peaks, and then you're seeing the wind and you get a little bit of mist sprayed on you as you're going by. So it's simulating that it's snowing. And I just thought that was really cool because it felt all of a sudden you'd been teleported, which by the way was so cool. And the best part I think of from a traversal standpoint was fiction allowing for I mean, I could talk about that all day, but that was so awesome to be able to use the portals to go everywhere that you wanted to. But it just made that moment feel magical. I was walking down these stairs and see this cold, this window, and it never got old to me. That was my favorite one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and I don't know how many people here maybe probably got to do this experience. Probably very, very few. I don't know where everyone's from, but I think what was really interesting about when you walk into the experience was we did want to set the tone immediately, from a haptic perspective, what the storytelling is going to be as it relates to the suit. And then as soon as you go through the first portal and you transfer into the Sanctum Sanctorum, you go down into the sanctum, and there's just an open window, like Shereif was saying, and you see out and you see the Tibetan prayer flags and you see Everest, from Doctor Strange, and you feel it blowing through the window. And I think what was really interesting for me in that process was it's just interesting how subtle you can be, just very subtle and have a massive impact on someone's emotional state. I think that's sort of, apropos of like life. Like sometimes the most subtle things are the most dramatic. And so just walking past that window with a fan and a very subtle mist of water with the visual transports you to that place. And then we go from there. Right now we're gonna take you to level 78 of that, right? We start at level 1. And I think that's what's fun about that, that experiential journey of what these LBE experiences can offer, and what, when you have that level of partnership, can bring to it from a Marvel perspective, right? Because now the opportunities are limitless. Where else can we take you with heat? Where else can we take you with the smell of popcorn, which was what we did in the Ant-Man scene, as you mentioned. The smell was just the smell of popcorn, right? And we went round and round on like, well, what would it be like if you're shrunk down? What is the sensory feeling that people would have if, oh, there's a question from the audience, I think, in the front row there. I don't know if we're doing that yet, but what are those dramatic changes that can be big and small, pun intended, that when we walk you into the Sanctum Sanctorum, you see an open window and you feel the cold air and you feel what it's like to be in that magical place with these magic windows. But then when we shrink you down to the size of Ant-Man, those sensory perceptions change, both physically for the person who's going through the experience and mentally, right? So it's fun to play with that. And I think that is what the promise of these types of things can do, because as we're all sitting here in our houses or wherever we are with these headsets on, it's great, but it's not an honest life, right? Like we're in a virtual world. But when you're going through an LBE experience, like what the Void brings to life, and I think they bring it to life like probably better than any LBE experience out there, is that physical and virtual. And so to those things that Shereif brought up, we played with heat, we played with cold, let's not go 12 rounds on the steering wheel of the Quinjet, but like, it mattered. Like it mattered, like down to every detail of where is the button, where is the thing. And Shereif can probably even speak to that as it relates to, Secrets of the Empire. But all of those things, mattered in terms of just going back to your original question of the smell. It's just it's a fun journey.
And I have one last question, and then we open to the public, and maybe we can answer quickly, because I know that there are a lot of people that wants to answer some question about Avengers damage control. My last question for both of you is, what's next? I mean, this experience that you built was incredible and is incredible, and we can't wait to go out and try it again as soon as possible. But what's next for this kind of entertainment from your point of view? I know that Vicky Dobsback, the CEO of ILM, is talking very vocally about augmented reality as the future of entertainment, and moving from storytelling to story living. We have, by the way, a wonderful podcast that I invite you all to watch called Field of View, that is made by the ILMxLAB, where Vicky is interviewed, and she says incredible stories about the future of entertainment. I wanted to ask you about the future of augmented reality, virtual reality, and immersive entertainment. What's next from you?
Shereif, do you want to go first? I know that Vicky, I didn't believe Vicky was speaking today, actually, on the idea of living story. I wasn't able to tune into it, but yeah, I mean, you want to talk about what you guys are looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just from a personal level too, I mean, I think that, what was really great about damage control and the void experiences was the level that immersion, it's beyond just headset, and I think that, the concept of the living world and using technology as it's evolving to really create that immersive environment is where we're headed. And so when we think about AR and we think about, okay, field of view is going to be improving on, these kind of various devices, the hand tracking is getting better in general, just higher performance, for there's different options of rendering, and it's always just kind of going up and up and up. And so I think what it is continuing down this path of innovation where we, like the damage control and like these kind of experiences, they were linear. We had exploration in them. I think where there's a lot of opportunity and really a lot of fun is when you do have more of an adaptable world, and you have what the promise of kind of AR is, like with it being based in the real world and augmenting around you, is that you can really try to create things that react to what you're doing as an individual, and having it in this kind of fantastical nature, I think just opens the door for different types of stories, and stories that are not necessarily, a linear piece of content that's just, 20 minutes here or 1 hour there. That's something that we can tie in to a lot of different things and a lot of different medium, and we can bring them from one platform to another, and just really talking about connected experiences and really, improving. It's really a different type of storytelling, and using that tech to really bring the world to life is really fascinating. And that's kind of what we're looking at, is how there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of, a lot of different avenues to explore. And, but at the heart of it, it's using this increased fidelity, using, better tracking mechanisms, but thinking about it at ILMxLAB always, we're focused on storytelling and what is it that's going to actually create a meaningful narrative that you care about, with characters that you care about and that you have agency in. That's always what we're going to be pushing forward.
Fantastic. And we remind David, you wanna add something? Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add that for us, it's at the studio. I think to Shereif's point, it's the technology. I mean, the two things that I guess I would just add to that is the first iPhone came out in 2006, I believe. That was 14 years ago. Think about how drastically that changed how people connect, discuss, move through the world. I think if anything, the opportunity is there if the audience is there. So the audience was there for what all these giant tech companies, Samsung, Google, Apple, so on and so forth, did with phones and did with tablets and did with things in terms of giving people options to experience things or connect or whatever, collaborate. it's going to be the same thing for AR and VR. I think the audience has to prove, as it is right now. I mean, it's great to see all these people here, you know, to listen to us talk about an experience that we did over a year ago. Is if there's an audience, it will be very, very well done by people that know how to do it, which these big tech companies and these big entertainment companies and so on and so forth. So I think, if anything, it's, for me as a fan and as a producer, I want people to be as vocal about this type of experience as they are about, you know, going back to the movies and going things. And I think that will come, as Shereif said, as the technology progresses and people see the fidelity advancements, they see the interactive advancements, they see the collaborative advancements. So for anyone who's a fan of this stuff, you know, get on a Reddit board, jump on a Marvel page, jump on a Lucasfilm page, be adamant about getting more content from the people that you like content from, whether it be us or anyone else. Because I think without that, it's sort of only served as a technology experiment and not an immersive audience conversation, which is what movies and entertainment is. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting for sure.
And we can't wait to see and discover what's next for ILM and Marvel in the immersive space. I remind you, everybody, that we are talking today about Avengers Damage Control, which is the Entertainment Out of Home winner of the VR Awards 2020. So we are going to open up for some questions. I kindly remind you that we are talking exclusively about this experience, so please, no questions about other Marvel movies, properties, or ILM or Lucasfilm movies or other properties. Thank you so much. So now you can raise your hands, and I'm going to open the panel, and you can just raise your hands, and I'll be able to allow you to speak if you have any questions.
Anyone?
Hey, me! Hi.
There's two questions, it looks like. Tammy and Bolt and this guy in the front. I can't figure out his name. Andre?
Hang on a second. Sorry. Opening the host panel. Can you raise the hand if you want to speak, please?
Andre in the front has raised his hand like 45 minutes ago.
Okay. Hang on a second. Sorry.
I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
All right. Andre. Sorry, I'm having some troubles opening the panel.
Oh. Hey, can you hear me?
I can actually speak now if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh my god,
Perfect.
I'm so excited.
So,
I've never been.
Hey,
Okay, so I think.
So
Yeah,
one at a
it's
time.
Andre, yeah.
Shall we start with Bolt? Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Hey, what's going on, guys? Congratulations on all the success that you all have had in VR. First and foremost. So unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to check out Damage Control, but I definitely will. I don't know if it's available for purchase, but if so, I mean, I'll definitely check it out. I think, like a lot of people here, I'm really sort of interested in where the future of this is going. I'm curious what you guys think, or what the timeline looks like for kind of like a photorealistic, and I'm not even sure if that's the proper way to explain it, but just kind of like a photorealistic sort of experience to where it's really difficult to differentiate, you know, kind of what we're experiencing now versus, do you know what I mean? Like, how far off is that, you think?
I mean,
Well,
Shereif,
I'll
you want to?
Yeah. And the thing that's crazy is, right, like it keeps getting better and better. The challenge, of course, is the uncanny valley, right? When the closer you get, in some ways, the further away you are, because it's very demanding when it comes, especially to human faces and human interactions. I think, honestly, I don't think we're that far away. I'd say for true photoreal, or we're talking like, Ready Player One, like you can't tell the difference. I wouldn't venture to put, it's a number of years, certainly. But I think it really is getting better and better. I mean, we see some of the bigger, engine companies, really making strides on pretty amazing new rendering techniques and modeling techniques. And it just, we have, next generation hardware and software. It's just going to keep getting better and better to the point where it is that like kind of imperceptible difference. I would say we're, at least a few years away from that, but I think just keeps getting better, and it gets damn close. I think within a year or two, it's pretty damn close in my mind. Perfect, not yet.
Yeah, I mean, Shereif's closer to the technology side than me, but just from some of the conversations I've had with people, inside, Disney and inside other things, is I think through Shereif's point, we're probably a couple years away from, I think as you look at like how quickly the Quest advanced and how quickly other platforms are advancing. And I think if you see, again, like I kind of was mentioning earlier, if you see a larger audience, you're going to see a larger investment, and then you're going to see the tech explode. You're going to see the advancements in lenses and interactives go really crazy. So probably a couple years, until I think we see a dramatic shift. But then after that, I think, again, it's like looking at what the phone market did from 2006 to 2020. The next decade is going to be extremely exciting in terms of what's possible.
Thank you so much. And I know that there's Andre that's also wanted to ask a question. Hang on a second. Let me unmute Andre. Andre, you can ask your question. You need to unmute yourself. Andre?
Andre was talking earlier.
If we go to Bolt,
we
got
just
Bolt
I think
before.
we just did Bolt, and then there was Emily, I think, or Tammy.
Tammy.
Was it Tammy? And Tammy.
Yeah, this is going. I want to go out.
Go, Tammy.
Tammy, go for it. There we go.
oh,
We lost Tammy. Oh no, Tammy fell out.
Any other questions?
I guess what I would say is I know a lot of people haven't gotten to experience Avengers Damage Scroll. Back to Bolt's question, only because it was such a limited release for various reasons. We look forward to hopefully re-releasing it in a much broader way. But I guess I'd be happy to discuss anything that anyone has questions on. Obviously I'm not going to talk about what we're doing in the MCU in the future, but any questions around what people think or want to ask about how we're addressing this content, in the future, if it's not specific to Avengers Damage Control, I'm happy to broaden the conversation topics.
We have Chris that wants to ask a question.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
yeah.
Okay, cool. So just you said about recreating some of those iconic experiences, right? Like the Iron Man blast, or like the Sanctum Sanctorum, like the Doctor Strange with the snow and those sorts of things. Was there anything you tried to create or you wanted to do that you just weren't able to do justice to, like, or anything like that? The expenses.
Yeah, a lot. Sure. Well, I guess what I would say is a lot, but also not that much, actually. I think probably 75% of what we set out to make, we made. I'll tell a fun story of a moment when what Shereif was talking about earlier is, as you're asking Chris about like what we could or couldn't make, it kind of went into a scope perspective at that point of, well, there's already 6 characters here. Do we need the 7th? Do we need the 8th? And that's always a fun question in the Avengers Marvel world, right? You always need the 7th and the 8th. That one day we were sitting in a review, and sorry if you guys can hear my dog. He's a little upset I've been in here this long. Is we were talking about there's a moment in the experience where Thor shows up, and we could not solve how to have Thor show up both from a render quality, timing, asset, all these logistical conversations. And it was this, everyone wanted him there. And then no one could figure out. And all of a sudden Shereif went, well, what if we just had him do this, you know? And so I think when it comes to the question of what we could or couldn't do, it comes down to always what are people willing to put, you know, on the line as it relates to these types of experiences. And I think, again, it goes back to just my thought process around what is possible. It requires an investment from a really core group of people. Shereif was producer, and it was his on the line for actually making it happen, and he was the one that threw it out. So I think that's, you know, when it comes to what we can or can't do in this medium, it just comes down to what people are willing to commit to. If that helps answer the question at all, like, yeah.
What was so cool about that, and we kind of touched on it earlier, was just like, it was so amazing. It's really one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on, because the passion that every artist and every engineer and every designer had on it, it was like a question of what we could and couldn't do. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, because under normal circumstances, half the stuff we did shouldn't have been done. You know, like it was not going to fit in the time that we had. It was requiring a lot of, you know, kind of intense, you know, dedication to resources, you know, time, budget, all of that. And it really was the individuals that they went above and beyond. I mean, so many of the team, you know, like they wanted to solve that challenge. Like they were so into the project, and they were so, you know, like wanted so much to try to create it like as close to film quality asset as they could. So it would be experimenting on their own and finding really creative solutions. And these are some of the most, you know, dynamic, you know, content creators in the planet in visual effects, you know, over at ILM. And it was just amazing that, you know, it wasn't because we came up with something and told them to do it. It was because they loved it, and they loved, you know, it was also just the development. I think like we were right in that time. I mean, Infinity War hadn't even come out yet. So this was like the apex, like the amount of excitement and just kind of the zeitgeist of the MCU was just, you know, it was like so palatable at the time, and everyone was just so juiced up. It was really fun because Dave was the one who knew, as the gatekeeper of all the things. Like we didn't know, it's even in the film industry, like you can't share those details of like what's going to happen and what's not and all of that. And us didn't even want to know, of course, you know, like don't ruin it. But it's like, yeah, maybe we got to use this other character. Don't ask why. You know, it's like, okay, got it. You know, like we were, you know, very respectful of the privacy of that and the importance of that. But it was so much fun. And that's really, when you think about what's left out, to your point, I think one of the things that I think, just a quick story about that was, we did initially have a concept of like carrying an object through the experience. And we really thought there was a fun mechanic tied to, like, you know, whether it's some sort of protection thing or, you know, something that's like imbuing power. Like there's a whole bunch of creative that went into this idea of carrying something through all of it and sharing that between the guests, of like that burden or responsibility. We found that just wasn't really great when you're talking about, since everything was gesture based and hand based, that it was just too tricky and like kind of like awkward of like, because you have that kind of line of sight when you're looking at your hands, and having a physical object, you just get a little messy. So we had some really fun ideas around, you know, what that, like some sort of orb and some MacGuffin of carrying around. But we did have to cut that one out and went in a different direction. So that's just one example.
I think that we have time for one last question, and then we're gonna close with the usual selfie with all the attendees here on stage. So is there any other?
We have to get to Andre. Andre had his hand up for forever.
All right.
Andre, we can't hear you, unfortunately. And now I can see the hands going up.
Sorry, Andre.
Andre, you need to. Okay, you are muted. No. Yes, you are muted. Right. Try to speak. Try to speak,
Andre, you can email your question and I will answer it. So will Shereif.
Yeah. I think Emily had a question, maybe.
Hang on. Emily, yes, Emily. Let me. Oh, I can't see your audio.
I think Emily is Emily still
disappeared.
here?
No, I think that she's not there. Any other question? Otherwise, I'm gonna open for everybody to come here on stage so we can have the final selfie with the attendees. Any question? 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, we
Someone
have Lawless.
please- someone
Lawless.
please,
Lawless.
Oh,
Lawless.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. You
can't hear him.
Lawless,
Amazing.
you need to unmute. Okay,
Oh,
cool.
here we go.
Perfect.
okay?
Yep,
Can
there we
you
go.
hear me? Can
Yep.
you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, like, congratulations and thank you. I've not seen the game that you're talking about in the UK yet, but I did get to see the Void experience. Are you gentlemen involved in the were involved in the Void experience or not? That's what I want to know. The Void.
Yeah, the
Star Wars
Avengers.
experience.
Unfortunately, the
That was
Avengers
amazing.
experience. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the Avengers experience didn't make it to the UK because of mainly because of the pandemic. But I know that, and I'll let Shereif speak to the experience that they did. That was definitely there. And then I just want to make sure that we don't lose. Someone please get in touch with Andre so we can answer his question. I want to make sure we do it.
Dave, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, Andre, I do PR and marketing for ILMxLAB. If you want to DM us on Instagram, I'll get your question answered, okay?
I can't hear you.
That's
Perfect.
a thumbs
Cool.
up.
Perfect. Okay, and then I'll let Shereif.
Brilliant. So
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dave and Shereif, for joining us into this AMA session with the AI XR, about Avengers damage control. I remind you, everybody, that the session has been recorded, so you're going to find it on YouTube very soon. Now I'm toggling the stage block so you can all come on stage so we can have a selfie together with our guests.